Welcome, friends, to another episode of Countdown to His Coming. And we're going to today examine one of these clearest signs and signals of the last days apostasy predicted by Scripture. And in particular, it is affecting families all over our world in different capacities, wherever the far leftist agenda has taken hold. And in America, this agenda was supposedly going to be stopped by our president by saying things like, well, Title IX is to protect females in girls' sports, so biological men should not play. And yet we've got states that are rejecting that, fighting it tooth and nail, fighting for men to compete in women's sports. It boggles the mind to think of where this might be coming from. Even folks that have no kind of conservative Christian agenda whatsoever, like great tennis star Martina Navratilova, once again posted this week of how crazy this is. Why is it that the Democrats in particular, as a party almost, have given up on protecting women and girls in sports and giving up their positions to some guy that decides he wants to be a female sports star by becoming trans? And as you look at these situations, you have to go back to where they have started from, because it has a very long history, and that was revealed this week in congressional testimony, including with a very good Baptist pastor, former pastor friend that's now in Congress that we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. So as we get to that part of the show, I want you to recognize just what this is a signal of. It's a signal of the last days apostasy that throws away everything that is godly. Your ultimate rejection of God goes much farther than just saying, I reject the Bible or reject Jesus, but I reject creation order. I reject the way you made me. And the ultimate shake your fist in God's face moment is when you say, God, you made me the wrong gender, and I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to take matters into my own hands, and if I'm a male, I'm a male. I'm going to become a female. If I'm a female, I'm going to become male. I'm going to change it because I can. Well, who becomes God in that situation? Well, today, as we look at this particular article, it's one that's entitled, Whistleblower Doctor Says Trans Blockers Hormone Surgeries Are Destroying Children's Lives. Now, most of us knew that, but in particular, in this particular article that was found in Breitbart, it gives the story of exactly how this was highlighted last week in Congress. You probably didn't see it on the news because there were other things that the media chose to put ahead of that. That's normal these days. But this is big news, my friends. And a surgeon and Texas Children's Hospital whistleblower, Dr. Ethan Haim, testified before Congress on Wednesday that transgender treatments the hospital practices are destroying children's lives. Now, of course, for children to be put in that position, they have to have some kind of parent who's listened to craziness or somehow in their own deluded mind decided that their own child is the wrong gender to even start this process. But as you listen, you'll find out there's a lot more behind it than even that. It seems to be a spiritual battle for the next generation of the world, which of course Satan hates and wants to destroy. Well, listen to what he says. This is one of the big quotes we'll get to in a minute, but he said they're putting them down a road, these children, putting them down a road where they become a chronic medical patient, the doctor said during Wednesday's hearing on ending lawfare against whistleblowers who protect children. Now, asked by Representative Mark Harris, Republican from North Carolina, who, as many of you remember, used to pastor the First Baptist Church of Charlotte. He's a good friend, and I can tell you he's solid as a rock. Well, he was the one asking questions of this particular whistleblower, and he asked him, why did you decide to speak out against these gender reassignment practices at Texas Children's Hospital? Well, Haim replied that he is risking his entire career to blow the whistle because, quote, they are destroying the lives of these children. Now, you can see his entire testimony online. I would recommend that you look at that. It's It's out there in video form. You can even find it on YouTube. And you can hear what he says detail by detail, because some of these I don't even want to mention online in my video. They're a little bit too graphic. But it's the truth about what's being done to these children. Now, Hain clarified that the problem with Texas Children's Hospital has to do with their leadership, asserting that TCH is an amazing hospital where the doctors do and what the doctors do and the nurses do on a daily basis is amazing, he said. But through all my experience working with children at Texas Children's Hospital, I understand and have seen the effects of what these blockers do, what these hormones do, and what these surgeries do. They're destroying the lives of these children, he contended. They are putting them down a road where they become a chronic medical patient that can never come back from, especially the surgical complications, which I see all of the time. Now, he goes into great detail describing some of these, so that what you're going to have are children that have to go through this process and become adults who can hardly go to the bathroom, who have to use strange medical devices the rest of their life, who will suffer pain the rest of their life, who will be chronic patients of the medical system the rest of their life, some estimating that it'll cost millions of dollars for each one. Now, perhaps there's a profit motive involved here. Maybe that's it, because, you keep these people coming back through the revolving door under the guise of acknowledging who they are and having respect for their chosen gender. And that kind of lunacy not only will drive them to these physical procedures, but think about the mental cost as well. If someone is allowed to just reject who they are and live in that fantasy land, what's that going to do to them in the long run? And what happens when they wake up? Do they become like some of these mass shooters have become here lately? Do they become violent? Do they become angry? Do they become bitter? Well, I think I would, as I look at the process and what it does to a person over the long term. And then especially when you wake up one day and realize you can't reproduce the next generation if you wanted to. You've been permanently sterilized. Well, some of these things I would encourage you to go read and check out yourself, because I don't even feel comfortable talking about what some of these folks have to go through to become this person in their imagined mind that they want to become. But to me, the most terrible crime in all of this is for a group of parents to get caught up in this fantasy land and believe their own child needs to change their gender and convince them of that, and begin to not only deal with their fantasies, but now begin physical processes with their own children, which now, to me, this is child abuse. It's an abuse to start putting hormone blockers into your child, to start making them think they are the other sex, to imagine in your own mind that you're doing them a favor by setting them up to never have children of their own. And this is, to me, the big dinosaur in this room. It's bigger than an elephant in the room. It's the dinosaur in the room as to what's going on with these parents, that they could begin to think about this in the first place. Well, listen to what the doctor goes on to say. He said, when I was at TCH, we would take children to the operating room and we would make them better. But in the same operating room, they were taking them there and making them sick. And he's talking about with gender reassignment surgeries. He goes on to say they were putting them down a road they can never come back from. So can I call myself a doctor if I didn't speak up against it? I couldn't blow the whistle to TCH. They were the ones who were responsible for the misconduct. I couldn't blow the whistle to CPS. You know how many children I saw in TCH that were being abused, Now think about this. He's watching children coming in that are having gender reassignment surgeries, and they have obvious signs of abuse, and yet the hospital is ignoring all of that so that they can do the big bucks procedure on the child. That is scary, my friends, but that's the kind of world we live in right now in these last days. That's one of the reasons I'm saying Folks, the coming of Jesus is closer than some may have imagined, because our Lord's not going to let this continue much longer. There is a time in which the cup is full. And what do I mean by that? It's the full cup principle. And judgment will never fall until the cup is full, and now it's time. Well, the cup is filling up fast, and when we start persecuting children, we are really running toward judgment. It was Jesus who said, "Beware for any of you that offend any one of these little ones. It'd be better if a millstone were put around your neck and you cast into the sea, because my Father watches over them." And imagine what a loving God thinks of people that are willing to completely abuse and sell off the next generation, as we've seen with so many things that have happened here in these past few years. Child sex trafficking, trade with children, selling children off, and now sterilizing children with these supposed trans surgeries. Come on, my friends. This is something that strikes at the heart of God and makes him utterly sick. He's not going to allow us to continue for a long time in this particular fantasy before it's finally going to be up. Jesus is going to return, and he's going to straighten this mess out. I believe that. I hope you do too. But he goes on to say, this surgeon, as he was being interviewed there, he recalled seeing one kid who had even had his fingers amputated by his parents. Now, the next day I was in that room, and who was in the room with the patient? The parents. The kid went home with those parents. And what are they going to do? You know, it's a good question. Have we now just completely thrown away the book when it comes to taking care of children and done just the opposite of what a Hippocratic oath would have called doctors to do, instead putting them through a torturous future and setting them up for great disappointment and bitterness down the road? He went on to say, "So what was I to do in that situation? I had to blow the whistle. It's my responsibility as a doctor. If they're going to mutilate and sterilize these children, someone has to speak up for those kids." Now, I want to encourage you to watch something else. I've talked about, it's been a long time ago, but I've talked about detransitioner Chloe Cole, who's so brave, sharing about her experience. And the combination of what happens when you're having maybe some issues because, hey, you're the younger sister and you've got older brothers and you want to play sports with them and act like them, and all of a sudden your parents are given the idea by a family doctor that, well, you must really be a boy. And to go through all of this in such a way that even the doctor pressures your parents to say, well, now listen, with this supposed little girl of yours, you can have a living son, or you can have a dead daughter if you refuse to transition her. And with that kind of psychological pressure, a doctor starts procedures on her that only stopped after she recognized how bad it was and rejected it herself. But not until she'd already had some, shall we say, medical procedures done to her that she'll never be able to reverse. And so, friends, what are we looking at here? We're looking at the great apostasy at work. We're looking at things that go all the way back to Old Testament demonic deities like Ishtar, who claimed that as a god she could change into a male and from a male back to a female anytime she wanted to, and had a whole cult of those who practiced this around her. Priests that were male that would dress female and vice versa, so that you would have an entire movement built around this whole idea of being transsexual. So this is not new. It goes back to some very old and very demonic practices that we should reject as a society if we want to be blessed by God at all. And more importantly, if we want to have a next generation of people that could be raised up to actually work in our country, survive, be the next generation of everything from taxpayers to lawyers to doctors to soldiers to Peace Corps workers, everything in the world. We're destroying that next generation by sterilizing some of this generation. Well, friends, it should be plain to anyone who has eyes to see and who has ears to hear. Let's get back to the creation order God gave us, the two genders He gave us, and live according to the beautiful pattern He gave us in the human family, with God being worshiped at the center and humanity continuing to thrive. The choice is ours, my friends. Let's make the right choices right up until Jesus comes. Now listen, I hope you will be going somewhere to church worshiping with God's people tomorrow. We'll be at the Columbus Baptist Church in Columbus, North Carolina. Some of you will be, of course, at Mud Creek in Hendersonville, or you'll be at Midway in Columbus, or one of the other great churches in our area or around the world. Hey, stick it out. Be with God's people each and every day. Don't you miss church. You don't know if this might not be the day God speaks to you so profoundly. So friends, worship with God's people this week, and I'll see you again next Saturday when we have another countdown to His coming. God bless you.